Hello, and welcome to this weekly coaching call. Today is May 20th. We've been doing this for a couple weeks now. And if you have comments and questions here, please use the chat box next to the video. Let me just also check that I can hear myself, I can see myself. Just want to make sure the audio is working. Box next to the video. Yeah, I can hear myself. Okay. So I'll keep an eye on the chat box here. And I'm just going to take one question so far that I've seen from Maria talking about question could be if there are any tips for restarting learning languages, what to begin with. And the second question, tips for watching series, movies, and then also info about any current promotions for subscriptions, membership of streaming services like Netflix, for example, and what do you use for this purpose? Okay, so let me start with the one about the TV series and movies. So one of the recommendations I would make, first of all, is to determine kind of what are some of your interests and what kind of shows you like to watch. So if that also is in your native language. So if you don't like comedies, I wouldn't necessarily recommend watching a comedy in another language, but I don't know, if you like drama, if you like mystery, then try to watch something of a similar nature. I also like ensembles, casts, where it's a bit more limited. So for example, if you take the Friends TV show in English, it's mainly a group of 6 actors. So little by little, you get used to a certain person's accent, a certain person's kind of personality, and you can make some guesses about what they are going to, what kind of content they would be saying. That would be different than watching a show, for example, one of these like crime scene or crime stories where each episode is a different story. So something like Law and Order, that one, you might have a few of the main characters, but there's a huge ensemble of characters that are only going to be there for that one episode. So trying to get used to somebody's accent, trying to get used to the way somebody spoke or said something, that's only going to apply really to that one episode. Whereas if you have a small cast of recurring characters, you'll get used to that little by little. I think also I might have a short attention span on some of the stuff if I'm using it for language learning. So I might prefer something that's like 30 minutes instead of 1 hour, because if you get distracted or you get tired and you lose track of a complicated plot, you're trying to do 2 things at the same time when you're watching a TV show or a movie, and those 2 things is you are trying to understand new content, a new story, an unfamiliar story, and you're trying to use your language skills. So our priority with new content and language learning, in this particular case, we'll want to prioritize the language learning part. So one thing that I have done related to short stories and reading short stories is I might take some information about that story or the plot or the characters and read a translation into English, just so I can be familiar with this information. And the idea is to kind of divide and conquer in terms of the what I want to focus on. So with the purpose of already knowing the story or already knowing a little bit about the plot or recognizing some keywords is that I'm going to familiarize myself, and then I can focus on the language element. So one of the things I've mentioned on, there's a post that I did on Instagram. It was really just 1 minute. It was very fast. But one thing that I can show you here, so let me take an example here. Okay, so you should be able to see this screen. Okay, so this website, Springfield, this is for like TV show subtitles, movie scripts as well. So if I just take this example of Friends, I need to update which episode, which TV series I can recommend. But here on Friends, if I go there and here, and then you have all of the seasons, all of these 10 seasons of that are on here. And once I click on one of these first ones, I'm going to see all of the subtitles here. And one of the things, at least for the listening comprehension, that I've done is to take this part of, let's say, the script here, and from there go over to a word cloud tool. One example is this one called Tag Crowd, and I will paste this, do some analysis on the vocabulary, so I can know that from the script itself, at least for my listening comprehension, I'm going to hear the words coffee, date, everybody, going, guy, really, something, sorry, think, yeah. These are a lot of the words I'm going to hear repeatedly. If I want, I could also put the number here for the frequencies. I'll do that one more time. So I'm going to hear the word guy 14 times. I'm going to hear the name Paul 19 times. I'm going to hear thank 9 times. So the size here, this is showing how frequent it is in a visual way. But I can count the number of times I'm probably going to hear that word. And looking at a couple of these words, this might give me some guess about the context. I could kind of skim through maybe a plot analysis or a plot summary, because our priority here is not so much it's the new content, and we're trying to figure out this new content. If our language skills are a little bit more like in the intermediate range, we still want to work on the language skills. Once we get to like a much more advanced level, our priority is no longer just the language learning element. It's now our language skills are proficient enough that we can focus on new content and not be so distracted about the language. So I kind of feel like it's like a seesaw. We're not really focusing on the two things at the same time. We're either focusing on one. If our language skills are not that advanced, then we want to have familiar content that we can work with, and then use that as a leverage for the language learning. And once our language learning gets more advanced, then we can go back and work on new and unfamiliar content without getting overwhelmed by the pronunciation or the vocabulary. That's one thing that I would do. Another thing that I can do with these kind of scripts and things that I've done before is taking one of these like open scripts. I forget what it is for TV. The free scripts, or forget the. Just one second here. No, sorry, Open Subtitles. Now it is. Not scripts, Open Subtitles. OpenSubtitles.org. And what I've done with this is taken, I'll just go back to, let's say, the Friends episode, because I know it is in multiple languages. So I will go here. And here it's putting in Spanish. I'll just, for the sake of this example, I'll put this one in Spanish. So here I have episode 1, I have the subtitles, and I want this file that says SRT, and I'm going to download that. It's actually a zip file here, but download that and then open it. This one's a little bit more complicated, but and from here I want to open up this text file. Extract that, I guess. And here I have this text file. So here, this is all of these subtitles. And what I'm going to do with that is, after that, I'm going to go over to a Google Sheet, put this in one column. So, and then I'm going to do that again for the English version. So I'm going to go back up here and get English for the same episode. And I'm going to look at, where was this one for Friends? Oh, I need to go back. Friends, 1994. Where is that? I have to go back to the. Why is that not there? Yeah, here. Friends, 1994. And I'll go back to the season 1. And this is in English. I know this takes a little bit more time, but once you do this once, it gets a little bit easier to try this. So I'm going to save that one again. And from there, open this, continue there. And I'm going to extract all. And then again, open this. So here it wasn't quite separated. This, okay, it looks like there's something strange with this text. Okay, this one looks a little bit strange. But what I would do after here is take these subtitles, paste them here, but it looks like there might be something strange here with the text. So I've done this before for multiple languages, where I've taken some of the subtitles here and then paste it at one column, paste it in the other, and then I have like a simultaneous translation if I wanted to. And I could even save this file, let's say on my cell phone, and I could be looking at these simultaneous or side-by-side kind of a translation, and I could be looking at some common expressions, common vocabulary. So I've done this, and because you can have multiple columns, I had done this a couple years ago for learning Czech, Hungarian, and Polish. I just put the English subtitles here, and then the Czech version here, the Polish version here, the Hungarian version here, and I could actually learn 2 or 3 languages with similar sentences and expressions. Sometimes the times don't quite match up completely on here, but you can see what would be on the screen at these seconds at 58 seconds to 1 minute, and you could be looking throughout this column here to kind of move them back and forth. But a simple approach, if you're just focusing on English by itself, would be, let's say, this one of the Springfield. You don't have to download anything. You just see the text here on the screen. And one of the benefits of seeing it here on the screen altogether is you can kind of anticipate what somebody's going to be saying next, or you could pause and try to repeat what they just said. Whereas when it's on the screen, when you're watching it, it's gone after like 1 or 2 seconds on there. So that's a little bit what I would say for like the approach I would try to do for using some of the TV shows, movies, is get familiar with where I could find some scripts, the subtitles, and try to watch multiple times. Try to work with an ensemble that has a limited cast, so you can get familiar with those characters. And then what was the next part of the question here? Okay, let me go back here, look at the question. And the other question, about the memberships. This one you probably need to ask a little bit more my wife what she's been signing up for. But at home we have Netflix, and we also are using Google Play for some movies. In Mexico, we had with Infinitum, there was a subscription that also included Claro Video, and that had access to HBO. So we were able to watch Game of Thrones on that. What else? Amazon Prime has video content. In the United States, I think there are a few other things like Hulu, and but I think I will probably make this a question in the Facebook group, and perhaps as a question, like what services are people using for watching movies. I know for English there is an app, a program that some people have been using. I forget the name of it. Some of my students have talked about it. It was, I think, based in Russia, but there was something that was taking movies, including some of these subtitles. So a few things I was just showing you right now, they would make that a little bit easier to handle, so you wouldn't have to do it all step by step yourself. But I mean, right now there's access to so many TV shows, so many movies out there. It's almost like there's too much. There's not enough time in the day to watch all of this content. So it isn't necessarily like more is necessarily the best thing for the language learning. Sometimes you might want to focus on a smaller amount and dive into that a little bit deeper. So you could use some of these tools like the tag crowd, where you could take some subtitles and find some of these frequently spoken words that you're going to hear. Maybe also go through some of the subtitles and highlight new expressions. And then you could add that into a vocabulary learning notebook. For pronunciation, there's also a website called getyarn.org, .io. I can show that to you briefly here. So if you are working on pronunciation of a few phrases, you can use this one. And these are short little video clips. So if I have like, if I'm trying to learn some phrasal verbs and one of them is like get out of here, what it's going to do is it's going to take all of these examples. You can see these shows, like here's from MacGyver, Vampire Diaries, Mork and Mindy, Simpsons, Goon, like movies as well. And you just see the phrase here, get out of here, get out of here. And you can listen to that, and it keeps repeating. These are about like 2 seconds, 3 seconds. You can work on that pronunciation multiple times. And it's really like a database of all of these little videos being uploaded or taken from shows. And I just want to say here overall in the notes, say hello, Coquet. You're not late. We're still here. Right now, I've just been showing a few things from a question by Maria about like using TV shows, movies, and also some questions about what kind of services there are for watching those movies. Let me move over to another part of the question, which was the kind of reboot on language learning. So if you're restarting a language, you might want to double check what is still there, what is familiar. So one of my approaches would be to take kind of brush up on what you've learned by looking at some of the beginner or pre-intermediate level books, and kind of go through the chapters. Try not to rush through them, but allow yourself to do some of the exercises, double check that you understand certain concepts like grammar, review some of the basic vocabulary. Might want to cover up if there are like a list of native language, target language. Maybe you want to cover up the list of target language and look at the native language vocabulary words and see, can you translate those? Are you familiar with them? So that would be part of the vocabulary. The grammar, don't necessarily rush back through the grammar. Part of refreshing a language and restarting with it is filling in the gaps, filling in any gray areas where you might not have really gotten a good understanding the first time around. Quite often when we're learning a language from scratch, we have so many things that we have to work on at the same time. So that's maybe an unfamiliar alphabet, maybe unfamiliar pronunciation, new grammatical concepts, maybe cases, maybe a whole system for the roots and suffixes and prefixes that might not necessarily have any kind of international common kind of base like Latin or Greek or one of those. So there's so many new things at the same time. This is similar to what I was mentioning with like TV shows and movies, is that you get so much new content at the same time. It's a little overwhelming to figure out where do you start. So sometimes we have to start with, in terms of the basics, is just let's get a conversation started. And a lot of these language learning programs will go through the like, hello, my name is, I'm from, and maybe it'll go through some of the practical reasons why people will be speaking for tourism, like ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, checking in at the hotel, visiting a museum. Like that's usually, at least on the tourist side of things, what people would be looking at. So they might be going through that step by step. And I think some of these language guides are not so much updated for a modern internet-based usage of the languages where like I have no intention of going there for the next year or two, but I'd like to talk to people, let's say on Skype or online. So trying to get some kind of a conversation-based approach. But so you need to start somewhere with language learning, and when it's refreshing it, you might want to kind of go back and fill in the gaps where you might have had missing grammar, missing vocabulary, because everything is so new. We're not going to be a master of all of it at the same time. We're going to get more exposure in one area, and then we're not expecting perfect proficiency at everything as a beginner. So once you're going back into something like intermediate or a little bit more advanced, you might want to go back, master some of these skills. If it's improve your pronunciation, then move over, expand your vocabulary, get better at the grammar, make it more automatic, double check that you're not making basic mistakes, things like that. So kind of create a system where you're approaching a few of these items and get those working well. So in my opinion, being at an advanced level is not necessarily that you know a lot of complex, complicated things. It's really that at some point, all of the basics have been mastered and you can do them automatically. You don't necessarily need to memorize all the rules and be able to explain these things to another, like a learner or something, but you internalize the rules and the understandings there, and you can do this as a reflex, so you don't have to think about it. That's a part of my understanding of like being advanced. I wouldn't necessarily that for me as a native speaker of English is that I have to speak like a very pedantic like professor at a university to be able to say that I'm an advanced learner in English. I can use a lot of basic English, just it's automatic, it sounds natural. I can communicate without hesitating too much. A lot of that comes through this repetition and filling in those gaps of kind of some of the basic material. And let me see here. Some comments. Yeah. Hello, Carol, as well. And from Sarah. Oh, I'm sorry about the times there. I thought this was... Let me double check here. Let me check. Sorry about the times there. Let me double check though. But oh no. Yes. Oh no. I'm sorry about that. Why had I put that so late? Oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I was off by 2 hours. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. My bad. I rookie mistake on the times. I have to double check these things again. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, this is 2 hours earlier than what had been said on the list there. Okay, I apologize for that mistake. I will double check this, double check again. Yeah, for Texas, yeah, Texas and Mexico sitting in the same time zone. I need to double check that. I'm very sorry about that. So, yeah, okay. Well, live and learn. Not getting all of this perfect the first time. I mean, this is not the first time I've done this for the timing, but I need to double check those things better. Okay, so with, okay, yeah, so for sorry and people in Europe, but yeah, so it should be for people in Europe, it should be about 3:30 right now. But yeah, there's the replay here. Okay, so the reboot on the restart on the language learning there. The Yeah, so you kind of refresh what you're familiar with. Try to make it a little bit more challenging when possible, because the first time around, it's going to be it's probably going to be baby steps to make it not so overwhelming immediately. So once you're refreshing it, you're familiar with more things. You don't have to go so slow. So you might want to look at kind of the review sections of the pre-intermediate level that might have an overview of multiple concepts. So you don't have to do it so slow and step by step the second time around. You might want to have a little bit more condensed so you can highlight some of those materials. And also joining, I guess, some language specific groups that could be for, let's say, intermediate level students, and see, kind of ask some of those people some questions like, what do you remember from that beginning stage? Because sometimes when everything is presented at the beginner level, everything is new, and everything is kind of given a priority of saying that, okay, this is important, this is important, this is important. But you might want to also be in contact with some intermediate level students and ask them, like, in reality, is all of this important? Now that you're at this level, what would you say you need to know is definitely a must-have in terms of grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation? So when you're a beginner, it's just this long road ahead of you. But sometimes when you're intermediate, you kind of look behind you and realize, like, oh, that was necessary, that was not, that was necessary, and that was not. And then you prioritize a little bit better on which elements you want to refresh and get better at. Okay. And yeah, okay. What were some other questions? The other day, I received a question on Instagram, which was related to, and continue to leave some comments here about questions that I can help you with. But there was a question that I had received in a private message. It was related to, how can I improve my accent? So this is something I probably want to turn into like a separate blog post or separate video here. But some of my tips for like working on an accent would be to identify what that particular accent is that you want. So if we take English as an example, English is a very global, broad language. So even within American English, British English, there are regional accents. And so getting an idea of which one you would want to focus on would be something useful to know. And then finding content that would allow you to listen to native speakers of that language on a regular basis. So if we take the example, American English and something of a kind of a common, kind of a broadcast kind of a English, I guess I would go into, let's say, kind of TV shows, movies, and then use that. Part of it, I would pause after a few seconds, try to imitate what I'm listening to, not necessarily worry about the understanding aspect, because it's just, you're going to be bombarded by the sound, but try to imitate sound like a baby would be doing. And don't worry if there are words or sounds that are still difficult, but at least maybe if you can write something down phonetically or something that would be approximative, that's enough to get started. And just try to imitate as much as possible. And at least for English, my big priority for a lot of students now is intonation patterns, not just isolated pronunciation the way it would appear in a dictionary, but putting this in a some kind of an emotional like charge, kind of like electricity. It's not just words on the paper, but it has some context, it has some purpose. So listening to, let's say, my daughter practicing some of her English, it isn't just I told you, Daddy, and some kind of a neutral just expression. There's some an attitude like a teenager that comes with this, even though she's 4 years old. But there's like, I told you, Daddy. So she's almost somewhat yelling something a little aggressive. You can see her eyebrow looking at me, or so it's all of it together. It's all packaged together. It's not separated by here's body language, here's the face, here's the voice, here's the words. It's all together. So if you go back to some of those clips from the like getyarn.io, you can see these words being delivered by an actor. Whereas if you look at it on the subtitles, you really just have the words by themselves. So I would say it's important to kind of have that combination of the words, the voice, and the body language all packaged together, and try to become a little bit of an actor when you're getting used to the accent, because there's a lot of cultural information that comes with the way somebody, let's say in the United Kingdom, might deliver this exact phrase versus somebody in the United States, and maybe different parts of the United States. And there might be a lot of socioeconomic, kind of educational background kind of things that could be tied into the way somebody speaks, or so don't necessarily not negate, but or ignore some of that extra information. Some of that does add to how you end up speaking and sounding natural and looking like a native speaker, in addition to just the words on paper. So accent is words, voice, intonation, and the just body language. So there are certain things on, let's say, my body language that I may have adopted in Mexico, or things that I picked up in Europe, in addition to things from the States. So observing people through the listening, observing them through watching them, is also part of that language learning and cultural learning. And let me take some questions here. Let's see, from Carol and Koke and Sarah, if there's anything you're kind of working on at the moment, if you'd like to share a little bit about that. How are the French studies going, Carol and Sarah? How's your English studies going? And since this is a small group, let me see here. And since this is a small group of some of you watching here, if you'd like to, if you'd like to join me here is, if you can copy paste that link You should be able to, if you want to join here, you can join me. I'll put my headphones on here, so any of you want to. So if any of you have any questions or want to talk for a few minutes here, these last be here about another 15, 20 minutes or so. But if you'd like to, you can click on that link or paste that, and that will allow you to join in this Hangout while this is still live. Recently, over the weekend, we were reading an article by Jessica of French Sunny Side, and that was about growth mindset. And yes, you can just click on that. It should open up the Hangouts. You might want to copy paste it in a new tab, and that should allow you to do that. I'll test that, see if that works. I can also post that on Facebook here as well. I'll put this on Facebook as well. That on Facebook.
It works.
Hello. Hi, Carol. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine.
I'll put this on. Okay, so that worked. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it opened a separate window for the Hangout when I clicked it.
Okay. Okay. So I'll press this as well. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Carol. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine.
Okay, so maybe check on the micro, not on YouTube. If you want to mute YouTube, because that there's going to create a delay. So try to have the audio that's coming from the Hangout. Maybe check on the mic. So keep the audio from the Hangout and mute YouTube.
Okay, I don't know how to stop the audio on YouTube. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine now, and I don't hear myself on YouTube. I don't hear the delay.
I just paused the YouTube. I didn't know how to.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, you can pause it. Okay, so you're here. So how is everything going with French studies?
Well, you know, it's going okay. I take a lot of lessons. I have a lot of conversations, but the one thing that I find, and I'm not sure how this relates exactly to what we were talking about, is that, you know, I've been doing this a while now, and, you know, I had past experience with French from way back. And the biggest problem I have now with French, and not so much with Spanish because my Spanish is not as advanced, but with French in particular, which is sort of my focus, is that, sure, I can speak, I can get information, I can give information, up to a point I can talk about things. And I make loads of mistakes, particularly with using the wrong person with verbs, or sometimes I can't conjugate it because it probably should be subjunctive, but I don't happen to know what that verb is in subjunctive in that person or at all. And I have been assured by my French language partners that not to worry too much. They're happy to correct me, but that one of them says that at least a third to half the population in France never uses subjunctive or doesn't use it correctly. So I feel better about that. But I still feel bad when I use it wrong, because they do feel obliged to correct me. And I only get, you know, certain ones that I know that I've picked up from repeated listening through Pimsleur or just have heard it a lot. But here's the thing. Okay, so I know either through my lessons or through listening, I listen a lot of more like, I don't know what you call them, but commonly used expressions. Like, I know about maybe they're conversational connectors. Maybe that's the
Mm-hmm.
correct term. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
know things, like alors and voilà and a
Okay.
whole bunch.
Mm-hmm.
But then and one I almost never use that my correspondents use all the time is par contre, on the
Okay. I
contrary,
see.
things
Yeah.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea how to get myself to work things like that I actually am familiar with into what I'm trying to say, unless I'm actually trying to say contrast something, in which case maybe I would use that. On the other hand, I would probably find some other way and go around that too. I go
Mm.
around everything. So I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, like, so yeah, one of them, I mean, your question here, like part of it is the subjunctive. I'd say, um, yeah, there are ways to get around it. There are ways to rephrase expressions. Yeah, there have been times where I'm walking to a government office and going like, how do I say that? And then I'm thinking, oh no, I need to rephrase it because I forgot that. And at the time I didn't have a smartphone, I didn't have a dictionary in my pocket or something, so I just had to use what was in my head to be able to
Yeah.
explain something. So
But how do you
examples like
transition into using these connectors or to using,
so the connectors ones, I would say,
expressions?
yeah, there are lists out there. So part of
Oh,
it
yeah.
is that's part of the passive understanding. The active part is um, taking a couple phrases that you already have written or something like that. So the idea would be you're not generating so much the content of what you want to say. You're just working with some familiar content of, okay, it was raining, we went to the park, and
Hmm.
seeing like what are some of the options here that you could put here, like, okay, it was raining but we went to the park, or it was raining however, or it was raining nevertheless, and trying to see what words could fit in that gap and try to
Yeah.
see how many of that you can add in there. Again, this is kind of like trying to do two things at the same time. One of
Yeah.
them is generate new content. And another thing is trying to narrowly focus on one element. So I would say take some of this information that would be you don't want to be creating all this content and trying to brainstorm at the same time, but take some phrases that would be either of a contrast relationship, a cause and effect
Okay.
relationship,
Mm.
a like an also, moreover set of
Uh-huh.
phrases, and try to just analyze those. I
Mm.
have an example that I have for the students working on TOEFL. Let me just go over here. And I'll see what information I can find that would be related to this for French. Um, so here, let me just share this on my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so let me go over. So this would be for like academic writing essays, and this is a lot where this kind of vocabulary would be inserted into these sentences. So the relationships here with these like addition and adding things like the also as well, looking at these consequence like the cause and effect, the contrast, comparisons, the emphasis, exceptions, examples, generalization, illustration. For example, the similarities, restating things, sequencing in terms of timing. So a lot of this would be kind of summarized here in English, and we could kind of look in as an exercise, like, okay, which ones do you know it already in French? for these different categories. And then there would be materials as well for looking these as a list together for French. And then coming up with these little phrases, these things here of these, this, and then I don't know. Also, we did this and try to build that up. And I had shown a little bit with using Google Documents and like the find replace. So you could find certain expressions that you're working on. So if it's the cependant and you want to kind of create a fill in the blank kind of an exercise, you could find things from the news that have a few phrases, or if I take an example like on linge, this will give me cependant. Look at that. So, that's I need to get this French and English or something. French, English. Okay. So from there, then I'm going to be looking at like cependant and looking at these little phrases that come up. So I get some of the definitions, but I have some example phrases here. So if I wanted to, I could collect a couple of these ones, put them into a Google document. If I wanted to, then I could, from there, I could kind of replace this, put a blank, like a little a line there, and then I could myself on some of that. I could also maybe take a couple of these phrases, see if I could translate them back into French. So, I mean, I could cover this side of the page. I could put this in a Google document. I could maybe highlight the word nevertheless and try to figure out, okay, how many different ways do I remember how to translate that one? And these, let's say French transition words. And I'm going to take a couple just to create this list and to help with the finding it. So cependant, néanmoins, puisque, let's see what lists come up here. So yeah, like 40 French translation word. That is close master, fluent U. To learn French, I'm not familiar with that website. But let me go with, let's say, fluent U, or fluent U, and see what they mentioned here. Okay, there's lots of advertising there.
Always.
And where's the actual list?
Somewhere.
Okay, d'abord, ensuite, puis, enfin, ainsi que, après que. So they give some example phrases and try to activate those if you can.
Yeah, it's weird.
Those.
Some of them I actually know, and you know, when I think, because I make it a practice to think in French, rather than thinking in English when I'm just thinking to myself about something I have to do or something I'm thinking about. And it's easy when you think because you can always fill in if you don't know the words. But I noticed that maybe I can make use of these connectors a little, transition words a little more when I'm thinking. But when I talk, it's like I don't know whether I'm afraid to use them because I think I'll use them wrong, or whether they just I think don't occur to me, and I just automatically go around the outside. You kind
of default to what you already are familiar with.
Right. Yeah. To basically just direct comments and not worrying about it. Except if I'm going to use something that requires me to like make an exception and say sauf si or something like that. But otherwise they don't come up. I mean, obviously, occasionally, avant que or something like that, but so rarely. And I've even taken lessons that focus on just some of these expressions, and I still just don't seem to be able to do it. And I don't know if there's some little trick to force them into my conversation or my thoughts for that matter.
Well, maybe like, for example, as here you have this list.
Yeah, that's a nice list.
This could be printed out. That could be printed out. That could be right next to you when you are in your conversation. So this one, it's a bit of a longer blog post, and they're trying to probably get, eyes onto the site and advertising. but you could definitely find a way to make this more compact and print this out, or put this into your own notebook and have it there next to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was also thinking that you might want to at least record yourself while you're having that conversation with your speaking partner. So
I do, but I can't bear to listen. But I have them all.
Okay.
Years of
well,
that.
well, you could. I'm going to stop the screen for a second here, but so what you could do is, I mean, if it's like an hour-long conversation, that might be a lot of time. But if you take a chunk of it, like 5 minutes of a section where you thought, oh, okay, I was struggling with this, maybe share that with somebody else. So for example, like I could listen for a few minutes, and if I understood what the context was of like what were you talking about at that time, and then think like, oh yeah, you could have thrown in this one or this one or this one, or take a few phrases. So the feeling I get when it's the conversation is like the brain says, hey, I'm going to my lunch break. I'll be back after your conversation. So things for all these vocabulary words, all this grammar, all these things, it's like you're back to the basics, or back to the instincts, or back to things that you've just used repeatedly. And so you do have to kind of activate these things. So maybe having a cheat sheet there of some of these phrases that you'd like to practice, maybe a little example phrase next to it, so you can see what would be a natural way to include it. If it's at the beginning of the sentence, in the middle of the sentence, what's an alternative, what's a synonym there, to practice with that. But so yeah, I think I'll probably turn this into an exercise for these coming up days of what are some transition words, and trying to spot, let's say, about 10 of them, and try to create some sentences that would be related to that. So I know, like in the Add One challenge, we would be working on creating sentences. So we could maybe pool our kind of resources together as those who are still active, at least for May, try to pool together example sentences that are using these kind of transition words. We could take that example list that I had in English to get started, and see what examples do we know in other languages. Maybe translate a few phrases, maybe record some if people are willing to create some examples in French or Spanish or English. So it's a good point to bring that up. Trying to activate that vocabulary, trying to add them into that speaking. And yeah, don't feel bad about it. I mean, it's very normal to learn a lot of the stuff and then realize like, like I can't just, I don't know, put it into the conversation immediately. It's a lot of trial and error, and kind of that esprit d'escalier, where it's after the conversation, you're like, oh, I could have said that. And that's usually where you can kind of take in some of the notes and write down those things. Okay, next time.
Cool.
Next time I can say this.
Yeah, I'll try that. Thanks. I have to work on that one.
Yeah, you seem to be active with your conversations and practice, so don't worry so much about the current conversation. Use that as your preparations for the next conversation. So there's always a next one.
Yeah. Can the people hear you still through YouTube? They can hear you?
Yes, yeah, they should still be able to.
Okay, because I saw a couple of people had come in, one or two.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, over here, yeah, let's see here. And my phone just turned off, so the battery died there. But let me move over here for watching the page. Yeah, I can see the comments over here. So just saying hi to Moa, and joining from Brazil. Yeah, it's a long time no see. And then great. Oh, and hey, Maureen, from my little English page. Yeah, so she she's definitely somebody to check out with, she's a bilingual, trilingual French, Spanish speaker teaching English in Spain. So
Oh, wow.
I would definitely refer to her with her language skills in that kind of mix of French, Spanish, English. I'll reach out to her, see what recommendations she
Oh,
has
great.
on some
Good.
translation work as well. So you're not alone with the language learning. Well, lots of people out there, and Jessica from French Sunnyside, who with her article, that's definitely a great blog to be looking at as well. And I'll reach out to her as well, see what recommendations she has. Right.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'm gonna probably wrap this up here for today. I know I had made a mistake. I'm sorry for the timing for people in Europe. I appreciate you still being able to join last minute here, and I know I got the timing right for Texas, but so thank you. I'll double check that. I'll double check that for the next week. Make sure it's correct for all those times. But keep these questions coming. Keep these questions and comments, because it really enriches the topics that we put into the speaking challenge, and making sure that it's practical and not just I don't know, theoretical, but like things that you could actually add into your conversations or add into your exercises or your daily usage of the language. Thank you, all of you, and hopefully this has been helpful, kind of opening up the chat also to bring in people. If you want to click on that link, I will add that in for the next time. So it's kind of baby steps on the tech, see what we can handle on here and bring in. But so thank you all of you. Thank you, Carol, and yeah, thank you, Maria, for your questions and comments here. Sarah, Koke, Moa, and Noreen, and we will be in touch, everybody. So have a great start to the week, and we will see you next week.